this event is made possible by several people, and we need to take a moment to acknowledge them for making this possible. Our media sponsors were the Gazette and Iowa Public Radio. We received grants from Think Iowa City and ACT, thanks to them. Adamantine Spine Moving is a sponsor, as well as Artifacts, Devotee, Feed Me Weird Things, and Film Scene, who are both represented on the programming committee. Haba Salon, Mark Sines, Realtor, who sponsored tonight's Puddles Pity Party show. Anybody going to that? All right. Martin Construction, Midwest Ticks, Phoebe Martin, Realtor, Reunion, Revival, Scope, who's co-presenting the Julie Byrne show, is also happening tonight. Underground Printing, the University of Iowa Lecture Committee and University of Iowa Department of Communications Studies, who helped us bring in Richard Hell and Lisa Jane Persky, as well as Catherine Faw, who are going to be speaking 5 o'clock after this over at the Englert, and then again doing a reading tomorrow. The 5 o'clock event will have them in conversation with Kimbrew McLeod, who's a professor here, a Little Village columnist, and he wrote a book about the New York City underground that is coming out this month of October. We also have the Iowa City Downtown District, Iowa City Public Library, Java House, Velvet Coat, and Watt Technologies. So thank you to all of our sponsors.
Yeah. Two things about Witching Hour. Thank you to the library because they ensure that very publicly that all the events here are free during all of Witching Hour. And just a reminder, if for any reason purchasing a pass to this festival is not in the cards for any financial reasons, please stop by the Englert box office and they're happy to deliver a complimentary pass to you, no questions asked, just do it. Or if you have a friend or colleague in that situation, just go out there, get them the pass and make sure that they enjoy and have a great time engaging with the rest of the festival. As a quick prelude to this actual talk that we're about to have here, and in conversation with Dan, we actually, Matt, myself, Allie, Chris, Rachel, Joe, and a number of other people were very, I would say, important and part of the crucial curation process of this festival. And as I talk to various groups and engage with people, they want you to ask what's Witching Hour about? What are you guys doing? Of course, we have our tagline, exploring the unknown, discussing creative process, and presenting new work across a range of mediums. But when I get down to the core vision or mission of what I think we're trying to collectively do is literally just to get our community out and all different sorts of people who make our community, to get them out to actually be together in the same space and to engage with some new, curious, special programming, whether it's a talk about a really important issue or just an amazing performance by a band. I think at the core, we're just trying to get us all in the same place to actually exist and thrive together. And I don't know if it needs to be more complicated than that. So thank you for being here.
Hello. I feel like I'm lurching over this. Welcome to Witching Hour. Thank you for the introduction. I'm Dan Boscaljon. I will be moderating this forum of the curators and asking about their curious connection with their communities. So joining us today are Simeon Talley, the founder or co-founder of the Middle of Nowhere and the Flyover festivals. Thank you.
Thank you.
And we have Carissa Stolting, who is here from the Big Ears Festival as the managing director, and Wally Chappell, who is the former Hancher executive director. And you did some other work also, didn't you?
A little bit.
Yeah, here and there. Yeah, all right. So the format is going to be as follows. I'm going to ask each individual a series of questions in kind of a longer term conversation. We'll do some Q&A from you folk and have a conversation that goes from there. Sound all right? All right, great. So Wally, I'll start with you.
Sure.
All right. What's a moment of attending a performance that transformed your idea of what art could do? What an art event could be, what a festival could be, what a series of things could be, what a program is? Is there a singular performance that really transformed or expanded your vision for that?
How long do we have? Well, I have to tell you there are hundreds, but I started acting when I was 4 years old, so that was 73 years ago. And I've moved from as an actor to a director to a producer to a presenter to an executive director of dance companies and so on. We do have, Rindy Eckert just came in, and he's an object all sublime of curators. So he is a curatee, as Carissa called. So he may have something to say too. I think, I remember working on lots of new plays at the Mark Taper Forum in Los Angeles. But I think the thing that I got my Hancher job in 1986, and shortly thereafter I went to the Brooklyn Academy, BAM, and saw a production of Nixon in China, which had a powerful effect on me. I sort of remember every moment, every second. It was John Adams wrote the music, Alice Goodman wrote the libretto, Peter Sellers directed it, and Mark Morris did the choreography. And that was a very powerful experience, showed me what a presenter can do. So that's the answer, yeah.
That's the event.
Yeah.
Okay. And in terms of your years of accumulating programs together and arranging and choosing this one or choosing that one, what would you say the values are that motivated what you selected? What kinds of things did you keep your eye on, and why those things?
I always think that you, as a presenter or as a festival selector, as a curator, you can choose to follow your audience, which is what I would call commercial, or you can choose to lead your audience and challenge them every step of the way. I tried to have it both ways at Hancher because I had to sell tickets and pay the bills with Broadway musicals, but I also want to do the interesting shit on the side, you know. That's how we paid for Rindy Eckert's work. That's how we paid for an awful lot of wonderful modern dance. That's how we played for a lot of the Kronos Quartet, so on. So I really value the exploration. I love the description of presenters as that we are the scouts out ahead, looking for fine new work, looking for fine new talent, identify a talent, then work with them for over a period of years to give them a chance to develop.
But what values in particular, like when you're looking for new work that challenges, what do you really, where does that come from for you? Like, what is it that you recognize when you see something, you're like, that's the thing?
That's a tough question. You know, I'm not sure I know the answer. I don't work from a particular aesthetic. You know, I'm not a minimalist or a postmodernist or a whatever. So I just, I love good work when I see it, be it Akram Khan or Rindy or Paul Drescher or the Kronos Quartet. There's a power that opens me up inside that I relate to. But I think what I'm always looking for is something that's making a statement about the times in which we live and how we can advance that time. Artists, most of them are really committed to that if they're good. What's my next step? And I like being a part of that.
Since you began your programming, has there been a sense of performances or something that went or worked or operated or that you found that really changed what you thought was important in programming?
Yeah, there have been disappointments along the way with companies and artists who maybe get tired or change or run out of gas, run out of support, lose their company, lose their board, lose their funding, whatever the reasons are that they lose it. I've observed that over the years. I worked with Bill T. Jones a lot, and we made a big commitment to him over the years at Hancher because he had a relationship with our community, a real strong one. As Bill got over, I'm not sure the choreographic skills were of interest to him anymore. He's got a wonderful mind. He's a very fine writer and loves to make speeches and dialogue with an audience. Maybe the dancing wasn't so good anymore, to be honest. So I find myself sort of separating back from wanting to promote and produce his work.
Mm-hmm. When you say that he had a good relationship with the community, can you describe kind of how that worked or what you were able to watch in terms of somebody really engaging with the community beyond just appearing?
I think when Bill first came to Iowa City, it was when the AIDS crisis was really hitting us here. And his partner had died of AIDS. He created work after work after work that dealt with that subject matter. Particularly a piece of his I thought was stunning called Still Here, 1994. And it was filming and interviewing people who had terminal illness. There's a subject for a dance. And he filmed them and ran multiple screens. He worked in Iowa City for 2 months at the hospital, taping and filming and talking to people, and developed a dance out of that with his company. And that was striking, that was good. And as the LGBT community here got stronger and stronger and more vocal, he was part of the spokespersons for that. He became important to them, I hope. You know, sometimes I don't know, we're always shooting off in the dark. You know, you talk about a lamp, you know, looking through the dark to try to find good work and good statements. But Bill T is an amazing old soul who was addressing an issue.
So to shift topics, I mean, I'm just trying to circle around kind of what guides a philosophy, but when you're thinking of what defines the character of a thing, whether it's the character of Hancher, the character of a ballet group, like any of the groups or organizations that you've been part of or seen, when you look at what defines the character of a thing, how does that character relate to the values of the people in charge of it? And you can answer from your own background, like the values that you've had that led to the character of Hancher, the values that you've seen other people have that have led to the character of whatever organizations they're also curating and directing and part of. What's that relationship like in your experience?
It's a delicate one. I think my problem as a presenter and a producer is the minute I sense somebody is stuck, that they're in a slot, that they're doing a certain kind of predictable work, I'm just not interested anymore, because they're not either. You know, so there's a buoyancy and a freshness and a juiciness in the work that's coming out fresh that I look for, and that's what I value. It's alive, it speaks to our time, it speaks to me. Now Yo-Yo Ma playing Bach can do that to me too, you know, as can Bill T. Jones or Paul Taylor or Alexei Ratmansky in the ballet world, you know. But I'm always on the hunt for that freshness.
What separates artists that are able to bring that freshness even as they grow older from the ones that you see kind of stultify and stagnate? Is there a quality of just who they are? Or?
Quite honestly, I don't know. I know Rindy has that ability to just stay fresh over the life of his creative periods. And some people move on. Some stop doing it. Some get a MacArthur grant and they say, what I'm going to do next week is stop making art. You know? Several of them have done that. So I don't know that I could categorize or typify that very successfully. A lot of the people like, you know, Paul Taylor, who just died, you know, he made pretty good work for 70 years, which is astounding. But he's a rarity, a real rarity.
So you'd mentioned the lamp earlier, and the two most common just kind of tropes in aesthetic philosophy are the mirror and the lamp. You either reflect what's going on around you, or you shine a light into the unknown. And so given those two metaphors, what responsibility or role do you think that curators and programmers have relative to that? Should they be more of a mirror? Should they be more of a lamp? What is it that you think most successfully creates the kind of community that you would want to live in?
Well, I'm really interested in both. You know, I don't know that I could separate that out, but you know, to hold a mirror up to nature and show the form and body of the time to the audience is a pretty wonderful definition of what a mirror is. And it can be quite harsh, it can be quite brutal, it can be quite edgy, and that to me is very interesting indeed. I'm much more interested in the lamp, though, that banishes the shadows. You know, we have a lot of shadows in our national life right now. I mean, when you think of, you know, Trumpian America, as opposed to Renaissance Italy or Periclean Athens or Elizabethan England. I mean, we've got a lot of work to do to banish the dark. And I think the arts are actually a very useful tool to do that, to sensitize people to their lives.
Can you give an example of that you've seen within Trumpian America? Is there a performance or an event that sticks out to you that you're like, wow, that's something that really did the work of transformation?
The show that Randy brought to Hancher last year called Me Lie, I don't know how many of you saw it, it's a chamber opera. Who was the composer, Randy? Jonathan Berger. It was about the My Lai massacre in Vietnam. Randy played a character that, based on a real man named Hugh Thompson, who tried to stop the My Lai massacre right in the middle of when these guys were shooting these villagers. Put his helicopter down, and he and his guys pulled out machine guns and put them on their own men and said, "Stop this." So that was very powerful. Vietnam still lives with us, or those kind of decisions. I do think that Trump is doing such a brilliant job at trashing our culture and taking any delicacy or beauty or sensitivity or complexity out of it. That's why we have so much work to do.
So if you were to put a mirror on Trumpian America, would it be, do you think, more valuable to do a straight mirror and reflect back exactly all the shadows that are growing? Or would it be more profitable to put a funhouse mirror up, which distorts the distortion of America and perhaps gives a cleaner view of how we can actually be?
I agree. Yeah. You just make me think of the picture of Dorian Gray in the attic. I wonder what his looks like.
Boy, howdy. Yeah, that's a question. How would you define the curator's relationship with the community, and how exclusive should those be?
Well, I think that any good curator continues to exist by selling tickets. No matter how much funding you have, no matter how much wealth or an arts council or a foundation or a rich doctor or whatever, you still got to sell tickets. And that's to me where the heartbeat of the community is, in the box office. I want people to want to see it, to want to come and be there for whatever reason. I can't predict it, but I think the curator is a man or a woman with a stethoscope that is really listening to his or her community every second of the day and trying really hard to engage with that community and make it a better place to live, because what we have to offer is meaning. Art offers meaning. So I'm still looking for my stethoscope, you know.
How would you define the community that you speak to or have spoken to most in your work with Hancher? What is that community?
The great thing about Iowa City is it is a place that reveres the act of creativity, okay? That is something that we all embrace and endorse, and we know it in our daily lives. I knew it the day I came here. That's why I wanted to come to Iowa City. And every day it just seems to prove itself to be true. So I think we're all very lucky and very fortunate to be here. We love the arts, to be in Iowa City, and to feed back as much excitement and as passion and entertainment as we can.
What, for you, is the measurement of success of an event that you've put on? What for you is the success or failure? What's the determinant or the measurement that you found most useful in your years of doing this that really makes it helpful to you to say, this is what I've done well, this is what I need to work on?
Yeah, I asked a guy once, this was at the World Ag Expo show in the Amana Colonies, sitting on a bale of hay, selling Hancher. And he said, Hancher, well, we don't go, but we're glad our kids can go. I felt pretty good about that. But tell me your question again.
What makes something successful? Or what makes it a failure? Like, what's the yardstick that you've used?
And another guy at that same affair said to me, what would you like to see at Hancher? I asked him, and he said full. He wanted to see that measure of success through the box office, as I described it earlier. I think what really matters to me as an artist is what kind of legs the work has. If Rindy's work in Me Lai or in Slow Fire 25 years ago, which was about a Vietnam vet, interestingly enough, has an influence on you or us to make another work of art, to understand it in a different way, to just keep moving the thought path forward, then that's really good. You know, I can see certain choreographers in my life now that I've had the opportunity to work with who influenced other choreographers. And that's really wonderful to watch that happen.
So how would you define your philosophy of curation, even in terms of a choreography of culture?
Well, as I said, I think we are the scouts out ahead, and that what we're looking for is talent and perception, depth perception. I don't know how much I could carry it further than that, Dan. You know it when we see it, we feel it when we feel it. When Yo-Yo Ma played Bach one day at Hancher, my chest just sort of opened up. I had this image, and the music came right into my body, and it was thrilling. I mean, so when that happens, I say yes, and I say I want to work with that person the rest of my life. So over the years, we made a lot of commitments to certain artists and certain companies that would come back again and again, like Bill T, like Kronos, like whatever.
Yeah. All right, well, thank you.
Thank you.
Give him a round of applause. Carissa,
Hi.
how are you?
I'm good.
Good. Are you ready for your turn?
Yeah. I'm
All
ready.
right. So just to start off again, what was a moment or a performance that really like anchored deep or rooted deep in terms of your inspiring your vision of what a festival or a performance or an art event could become?
Yeah. I trace this back to one story that I could share. Does my microphone work? First of all,
You can scoot it closer to you, maybe.
Yeah, so it's really hard. I've been blessed. I've been able to see so many moving performances, but I can trace it back to one where something cracked open for me. And this was in 2008. I went to South by Southwest. I was a French teacher at the time, and I was just going for fun. I had a long list of whatever indie rock bands of the du jour. And I ran into a friend who invited me to go to this concert at a church. It was Abigail Washburn and the Sparrow Quartet. And she played this song on the banjo. First of all, she told the history of the banjo, how the instrument has become known as a traditional American instrument, but the origins are from Africa. It came over on the slave ships. It has a very dark history. And then she played this beautiful, beautiful song that was actually a traditional Chinese folk song on her instrument. And I think that was a turning point for me because I felt here in this one moment, she has connected 3 continents, and she has, through this instrument, found a common thread through so many different people. I mean, literally billions of people, people's stories. And I think that was a real turning point moment for me. I also had like a kind of a surreal physical experience where I felt like I was traveling through space and time, and I felt like that was a turning point where I realized the power of what music can do, like outside of just being entertaining, what it can do, like how it can change your worldview. And and then I think working to find and create the platform for more artists to share work like that was, an important moment.
Can you describe Big Ears to those of us who don't go to Knoxville as often, and just kind of what that festival is and how you use those kinds of integrating musical moments of transformative power, and how that sense that you got relates to what goes on at Big Ears?
Yeah. So first I want to say Big Ears is the vision of Ashley Capps. He has been He's a promoter in the Southeast. He is also responsible for Bonnaroo. He's the real engine behind, creating the festival. And I am so lucky to be a part of the collaborative effort that goes into curating the event. But I can describe this as best as I can. It's impossibly beautiful and surreal. It's an event that takes place over the course of 4 days in Knoxville, Tennessee, the foothills of the Smoky Mountains, inside beautiful historic theaters that are within walking distance. And we have somehow been able to convince some of the world's most incredible talent to travel to Knoxville. There are no direct flights, by the way. But we've had just such a beautiful, beautiful variety of artists who are also, resonating on a deep level with a mission and message behind their music often. But we have had everyone from Philip Glass and Laurie Anderson, John Luther Adams, to, some of the most wild young innovators like Jay Lynn, electronic producers. There's a strong jazz component to the festival as well, honoring legends in that world and also all the new up-and-coming talent. And then from year to year, these curatorial themes start to emerge that, like an additional thread that supplements kind of the flavors of the festival. But
How do those emerge?
yeah, that's a really good question. I think it's, and Ashley would be so good to, we've talked about this before, it's, I don't know that it's necessarily entirely intentional from the beginning, but it does seem like emerge is the right word. It does seem that these things begin to unfold over time. So as an example, this year, there are a few very special projects that we knew we wanted. One is a work called Triptych that is composed by Bryce Dessner, written for Roomful of Teeth, on the work of Robert Mapplethorpe. It just sounded so wildly, just relevant and important and interesting. We knew we wanted that. We knew we wanted, Rhiannon Giddens has written music for a work with the Nashville Ballet called Lucy Negro Redux, which is based off of a book of poetry by Tennessee poet Caroline Randall Williams, imagining Shakespeare's Dark Lady sonnets as if he had fallen in love with a black woman. And we had fallen in love with Rhiannon Giddens in general and this work and bringing the ballet to our city. So there were these, and we also, and Rachel Grimes, a composer that is also near and dear to my heart, she has a folk opera that's retelling generations of Kentucky history through women's voices. And so we started with these sort of three primary works, and then an interesting connection between all of them seemed to be silenced voices and amplifying voices of people in communities that haven't historically received that. And then as a sort of, like, that was kind of this metaphorical amplifying of voices that emerged as a theme. Then the interesting thing was it also translated very, very literally. We started having this thread of just incredible vocalists, choirs, vocal innovators. Joan LaBarbera doing voice as the original instrument. Meredith Monk, all of her wild vocal work. Roomful of Teeth is going to be there. Also, Yonatan Gott with the Eastern Medicine Singers. They're like a Native American ensemble. All of these real, actual, like, voices of different using voice started to just emerge. And I can't say from the very beginning, having been in the room at every conversation, I can't say that we all sat down and said, hey, this is our theme. But once it started to reveal itself, we just gravitated towards that more, and that helped guide us a little bit. Yeah.
So is it that you really started being able to see what you were looking for? Is it more of that, or do you think that on the national landscape, other artists are just really interested in certain kinds of questions that you yourself are interested in, or is it some sort of combination?
It goes back to the mirror lamp metaphor. Is all this emerging because artists are drawn to this and gravitating towards it, and and we have a platform to bring this together and highlight and frame it. That's a really good question. I don't know.
But you're the only one who can answer it in
Yeah.
the entire world. I mean, no pressure or anything, but
Yeah. It seemed, it just seemed effortless in a sense. Like all of the sudden, it became clear to us, and then I feel like we wanted to nurture that. It was almost like, you know, there's this, I guess when you're looking at the blank page thinking like, who are we gonna bring to this festival? It's jumping off of a cliff. And, you know, you're just gonna kind of see, you have some ideas, some guidance, but you just start from a blank page, and then start gravitating what you're pulled towards and what feels compelling, and then, yeah, theme emerged. Last year, there was a strong Appalachian roots component to the festival, and connecting the dots between these amazing bluegrass pickers and jazz players, and the headiness of old time playing and drone, and just kind of showing how these wild experimental artists in any genre have this common thread. And yeah, I don't know.
So does anyone else at the festival appreciate that? Like, do any of the performers understand what you're doing? Does anybody in the audience know what's going on? Or is it really something that you, from your position as somebody who understands in depth everything that's going on, can just look back and be like, wow, that's pretty cool.
Like we did that. You know, curiously, presenting Appalachian roots music as experimental music, that really was seen. And we didn't have to call it forward. But a lot of these artists are, you know, like Anna and Elizabeth, they've got 1 foot rooted in the archives, researching, you know, these old Appalachian recordings, 1 foot, you know, hunting down Jim White to put a drum track on their record. You know, they're already there because they're just innovators. And so, if anything, you know, maybe there was this critical mass of like bringing those artists together who had that focus, like, it becomes like, oh yeah, okay, we can see this thread. I don't think we had to say it. I don't know, with Big Ears next year, it's hard to tell if like the theme that I was talking about, like the vocal, I think it will. I think I think it's gonna come through, but yeah.
So how much, in terms of the work you do, like you've described like having things develop, so this is like 7 minutes and 3 questions ago. So but there was a little point where you talked about like how things developed within a festival, and then it seems like you find artists who are also kind of relevantly circling around some of the issues that you yourself as a curator are interested in. And what I'm curious about is how much a festival develops its own community of artistic collaborators, that like what Wally was talking about, where you'd have a relationship between artists that come each year. Does each festival have its own generation of intermixed artists that can go and appreciate what each other are doing and then spawn forward into future works? Is it a relationship that's a community of artists, or a community within the Knoxville local area? What kind of community is Big Ears?
Oh wow. I feel like that was a lot of questions in one question. I think I can. It's really good. I mean, my first thought was, what kind of community is Big Ears?
Yeah, or I mean, how many different communities does Big Ears manage to hold together?
So to touch on the first part of the question, yes, we do build relationships with artists, and there's a lot of returning artists when, you know, with new projects to present. Multiple artists come a few years in a row, and they are part of the family. You know, even to the extent of, you know, whispering in our ears sometimes on a curatorial level, like Bryce Dessner, who was very, very, very deeply involved with the 2010 festival, helping, you know, make recommendations of artists as well. So there is absolutely a family. And the thing that's so fascinating too, maybe this is where like location becomes an interesting factor, since Knoxville has to be a destination location because it's kind of out of the way. Artists come and they stay for 4 days. So then, at our like local restaurant pizza place, the Tomato Head, you're like, oh, there's Terry Riley. He's getting a pizza. And, oh, he just ran into Diamanda Galas and they're talking. It's just, it's so wildly surreal, but a real family starts to feel like it's being built over the course of the festival weekend too. And a lot of the artists, I hope I could say this, I can't speak on their behalf, but I think that the festival feels like a creative, nurturing space. And so they will stay, they'll attend concerts, they'll, just kind of hang out. And that starts to feel like a community in and of itself. We do attract a lot of attendees coming from outside of Knoxville. But it's never felt segmented to me. It hasn't felt like, oh, artists are over here and out-of-towners are over here and locals are over here. It's a small town. Everyone talks to everyone. It just feels like this really special family that inhabits the
How
city.
big is small to you?
I don't know the population of Knoxville off my head. I should, but
All right.
I think there's a
If
lot of
only
parallels.
there was a device that somebody had that could magically whisk that number out of the ether. I have no idea
I
what
think
that
there are
would
a lot
be,
of
but-
parallels. I feel a lot of parallels between Iowa City and Knoxville. Just like, I feel like the creative thread here. It resonates. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
What, if you were to look at the regional audience of Tennessee and some of the southern areas that border Knoxville, the local community who's just rooted there, the townies and the whatnots, and then the artistic community that's also, like you have these communities that kind of overlap or stack onto each
Yeah.
other. As curator, is your goal to really find threads to bring all of those together, or is it to nurture each one of those, or to create spaces in which each of those can be nourished differently at the same time?
I think the first thing that comes to mind is just touching on, like, our hope is that people will just be curious, And I don't know that we, think about all of these layering of, well, this is like the people who are coming from the county, and this is this. I mean, our hope is just like, we put on a ton of events that are open to the public, like 60 to 70 workshops, concerts, panel conversations, film that's just free and open to the public, and we hope that everyone will just come try it. I think a lot of what makes this beautiful is that, we're not booking the most commercial artists, but that does create a challenge when you're trying to sell tickets and people are used to buying a pass because they recognize headliner A, B, C, and D. So, yeah, our hope is just give it a shot,
And this is a last question that occurred to me as you were talking. And if you don't want to answer, if you want to think, that's fine. I can move on to Simeon. But Wally was talking about how artists would at a certain point just stop being creative. I was wondering, in your experiences, at what point does a festival just really lose all of its character and die? Or at what point should a festival be put out of its misery?
This is a really good question, and I feel like we kind of talked about it earlier today in Andre's class. Big Ears, it's been really well received. It's been successful. There's a lot of love and appreciation for it in even on like national media scale. At some point you have to determine, like, do you grow and kind of maybe change the dynamic of your festival? Or do you recognize that what this is the creative incubator that makes it magic? And so with Big Ears, we decided to keep that, okay, let's keep focusing on this and making this as strong and as wild and as beautiful as we possibly can. And I hope that will serve the festival well in the future. And I don't know. I think as long as there's, as long as there's curiosity from the curators, and you kind of make sure you're continually searching for, like Wally was saying, that thing that just like breaks your chest open. I think that it'll work.
Can I push a little bit?
Sure.
Wally, go ahead.
Population of Knoxville is 186,000.
Oh, thank you. How does that compare with Iowa City?
We're about
Twice the size.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. How big is small? That's an interesting question.
we're about the same size as Santa Fe, interestingly enough.
Interesting. Okay.
So what would be, more and more festivals are popping up all the time. Like every summer, it seems like somebody's planted a new crop of them, and like each state has like 10 more that you can go to.
Yeah.
When is it that a festival isn't actually art?
When a festival isn't
Or
actually
when it's
art.
died, when it's run its course and it should be put out of its misery, or a new one that comes and it's just like a zombie festival, you're like, why is this even here? Like,
I think it's just as impossible for me to answer that as it would be for Wally to imagine why an artist might, have a stalling point. I think it's all about passion and curiosity. And if you lose that, like if the people who are putting the event together lose that, or the curator loses that, then yeah, it'll probably start to feel pretty stale. I don't know what would, I couldn't like say this exactly is when a festival should be put down. I don't know.
Ready for that, Andre?
all right, give her a hand. Sorry about the curveballs at the end.
I love that was my last line. I'm like, okay.
How you doing, Simeon?
Good.
So you run 2 different festivals.
Yeah. I'm, I guess, one of those guys who's sort of behind some of the newer festivals, and the reason why newer festivals are popping up that you just mentioned.
Yeah. See how
better,
I
for
set
worse.
myself up for that? So can you describe Middle of Nowhere and the Flyover Festival for those of people who are here?
Yeah, very quickly, Flyover Fest, which is next year will be the 5th year of the festival, was started several years ago and was produced by an organization called Iowa Fashion Project. The first name of the festival was Flyover Fashion Fest, and as the name suggests, it was a fashion-based festival that sought to kind of elevate, connect, and provide a platform for local Iowa-based and even Midwest-based fashion talent. And what we saw was that through sort of providing a platform and an entry point for people to sort of appreciate and show their work or showcase their work through fashion, it allowed for us to work with other parts of like a creative community. So whether they be photographers, stylists, other artists, musicians, fashion was really an entry point for lots of different creative folk to get together. And those people didn't really have a platform or an outlet to connect to each other, but also sometimes to showcase their work. So that's what sort of the festival started as. The latest iteration, Flyover Fest, was much more focused on inclusion and representation and using fashion still as a starting point, but as a starting point and an entry point to explore and discuss deeper social issues around inclusion, representation, equity, and whatnot. And I guess Middle of Nowhere Festival is an electronic music festival. And we're still figuring out where to go with this one, to be honest with you. But we just wanted to put together an event and a festival that took electronic music back to its roots. We thought that electronic music had been oversaturated with EDM, and we thought that Iowa City was a community that could appreciate something more raw, original, authentic to the history and the foundations of electronic music. And coincidentally, the University of Iowa and the city has a connection to that early history of electronic music. So that's what Middle of Nowhere was about. We're still figuring it out, but Flyover Fest will be back next spring.
So how has the community changed with each iteration of Flyover Fest?
That's a good question. I think a lot of the changes of the festival, specifically Flyover Fest, have kind of been driven by changes in the community. you know, it was really cool and interesting and kind of sexy when we put together the first Flyover Fashion Fest. Like, fashion is a thing in Iowa. Oh, there are designers, or there are fashion people, there are brands, and there's this sort of unspoken or not known about community of people that are interested in fashion or even creating around fashion. And there's this festival that's kind of sexy. But what we found was that we were really, when we were, you know, putting together fashion shows, we weren't being inclusive enough. We weren't being represented enough, specifically about the various body types that we were working with, or that we were projecting as the standard of beauty. And the community really forced us and pushed us to be better in that respect. And so this last year, there was a lot of programming and events around body positivity. And that was really driven by just people saying, you guys need to be better.
So as curator, what do you think that you are doing that allowed you to listen to a community that might have had opinions that other curators would not have necessarily known to hear?
Yeah, I think you just, as a curator, as a programmer, you just have to be responsive to the community. And when you're putting together your team of folks that are, you know, curating and producing a festival, you try to be mindful of the voices and perspectives and the communities that they come from, that they represent. So you're getting a holistic sense of what people are really interested in, what people want to engage with, and how the community is really responding to your festival. And so, you know, we added some people to our team that could really speak in an intimate way, in a personal way, to specific issues that we wanted to explore in the festival. And I just think you just have to sort of make that a value, or, you know, have that be something that's part of how you put together your team, or, you know, how you approach putting together a festival, is to you know, we're going to be responsive, we're going to listen to folks.
How do you know who to listen to, though? I mean, because you have like this squeaky wheel thing. Like, I'm sure as events programmers, you've all had people complain about, like, it's not this enough or not that enough, right? I mean, so what as a curator, what informs you about what kinds of comments are really ones that you need to listen to in developing and growing and changing?
That's actually a really good question, because you can't listen to everybody, right?
You'll go crazy.
You'll go crazy, and some of the feedback you get is just, they just don't get it. They don't understand what you're trying to do, or this maybe isn't for them, right? But I don't know, you have to use your best judgment and try to understand where people are coming from. And just personally speaking, I try to have lots of conversations with folks, hear lots of different ideas, and kind of synthesize and try to make sense and piece together. If I'm hearing, you know, the same thing over and over and over from people I respect, okay, you know, that means something to me. If it's an isolated thing, or just to be sort of completely candid, you know, the last year's festival, the talent that we brought to the event, overwhelmingly persons of color. Some of the feedback that we got was, and these are from white folk, I didn't feel like it was a festival for me. Do I listen to that? How do you sort of navigate that? How does that sort of inform future events and how you program, you know? And it's not so easy as dismissing it as, oh, that's, you know, that person sort of, you know, that's just a white person sort of like not feeling comfortable, and they need to be made, you know, to feel uncomfortable in certain, you know, certain events. But the reality is, we live in Iowa, right? This is Iowa City, you know, it's a white state. The ultimate sustainability of the event, of the festival, is predicated on white people showing up. You know, and organizations and businesses where white people are leading them, giving us money, right? I don't know, and so you just have to have conversations, hear people out, and do your best to navigate it.
How do you frame conversations to help white people understand where, like maybe it's not filled with white people, but it's still okay? Like to what extent is it good to create a really exclusive community where white people don't feel comfortable as part of what you're creating? And how much do you want it to be an introduction to how to be a more human being?
Yeah, I guess that maybe two ways to answer that question. What I try to tell folks is we're living in a moment where there are lots of people, lots of communities whose voices, perspectives, narratives have been marginalized, have been excluded for so long. And we're living in a moment where they're either creating their own outlets and ways to tell their own stories, to get their own ideas, push them to the forefront, or they're demanding that organizations and institutions and businesses and governments consider what they're saying, right? To me, that's the moment that we're living in. And if someone just can't appreciate that and understand how we're trying to tap into that, then there's really nothing I can do with you. Gosh, I forgot the second thing, but that's really how I try to frame it for folks, is that I think it's really, really, really important that if you consider yourself a progressive-minded individual and you care about community and you care about everybody feeling a sense of that they can plug in and participate and feel welcome and feel included in the community, that there are lots of people who just feel that they've been excluded, they've been marginalized, they've been left out, they feel locked out, they feel like they're on the outside of the glass looking in. And what we want to do with this festival is sort of elevate and prioritize those voices and those narratives.
What do you do with middle of nowhere then? Like, how does that play into the, like, 'cause I can see that kind of philosophy that guides you.
Yeah.
But the marginalized and excluded group of people who like really, really old electronic music and really value that kind of going back to the original roots of it, that's a very different kind of left out, marginalized community, maybe. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, there's like a philosophical answer and there's just like a practical answer. So the first year we tried to do a 2-day festival. We had, 20-something events. Realistically, it's probably a 1-day thing. It's probably, 2 venues, and you just sort of start there and you build, and do that right, perfect that, and grow from there. Philosophically, I don't know. I think we made some assumptions about who we wanted to attend the festival, and they were incorrect. We timed it so that it was like one of the first 2 weeks of the school year, thinking that, oh man, all the students will be back. Kids is sort of dismissive, I apologize. All the students will be back. And there's really nothing happening this weekend, and they'll just sort of show up to this, right? But we should have just really understood our audience and our demographic and who this is for, and just, done that.
Who is it for?
All those excluded, marginalized, older folks who don't want to listen to EDM. No. No. I think, that, and I think there's a demographic and a constituency of people who patron the arts in Iowa City, who will take risks, even if they don't understand, even if they're not familiar. And this is sort of to the credit of this festival, the Englert, Witching Hour, Mission Creek. They've really sort of, in Hancher, they've really built this constituency of people consuming arts and culture in Iowa City, that even if they don't get it, they'll take a chance on you. They'll come to your event. They'll check it out because they understand there's the intrinsic value and the need to support the arts in Iowa City. We should have sort of went after that community, like very specifically and intentionally. And even if, there's like, there are folks who are like tired of EDM, this is for you. But all you people that are, going to the Englert for a show, or Hancher for a show, or the film scene, or, the museum, the Universal Museum of Art, like this is another opportunity for you to appreciate and get down on some really interesting and thoughtful, meaningful, cultural, artistic programming.
Can I bounce back to Flyover Fest as the last question before we open it up to
Yeah,
the crowd?
man,
Is that,
yeah.
can I give you a chance to switch gears
Sure.
mentally from one
Yeah.
programmer to the other? Okay. When it comes to, so I was talking to Carissa about how communities emerge and grow within a different culture, and it sounds like part of what you've been doing with Flyover Fest is watching as the designers and the stylists and the artists that don't get recognized often as artists started to talk to each other a little bit and transform what you even understood your own event as being. Is that a fair way of recontextualizing what you had just said?
Sure.
Okay. So if that's true, what direction or what kind of doors or opportunities are you hoping to offer people that haven't been seen as artists or just haven't been seen, period, as Flyover Fest continues to develop?
Yeah, I think we want to be a festival that is willing to take a risk on emerging talent and provide them a platform to a broader audience and a broader community. And I think we want to be a festival that there's a real sense of community among talent, performers, producers in the audience, where if you're sort of looking to plug into, some creative type of community and you're, a photographer and you've been out there, trying to build your photography brand or business or skill set, and you're not quite sure of where to plug in, this is a festival and an event and a community that you're gonna come and find other like-minded, similar situated, folks. And you're going to be able to build from there. You're going to make meaningful connections and not feel isolated or not feel like you're trying to figure this out and I feel so alone and, where are the people like me at? You come to this event and, oh, wow, this person's trying to do something similar to me, or, oh, this person has this dope line. Let's work together. We want to be the festival where those types of connections can happen.
All right. Simeon. And we now have time for some questions and answers. Ryan is standing in the back with the microphone. Because this is being broadcast live, if you could speak into the microphone to ask your question, that would be appreciated by those. Everybody in the world is watching and listening to this, no pressure. So if you could speak clearly into the microphone when you have a question, that would be great. Are there questions?
Are you trying to build a brand with your festival or whatever, and so eventually, after I've gone a couple, 3 times, that I will go again and trust you that there's going to be good entertainment there, even though I don't know headliner 1, 2, 3, or 4? Or is that part of it, or how does that work?
Go for it.
I'll jump in. Yes. So Dan was wonderful and sent us some homework questions to prepare. And one of them was, how do you measure the success of your festival? And in just, there are so many ways to measure the success, but one thing that, with Big Ears, one hope would be that we could, announce our festival and have people just want to, I'm in, without even announcing the artists, just say, here are the dates and mark your calendars. And we've had that happen so far. I think that we're working towards building that trust. And yeah, that would be a dream, that somebody would, believe in us enough to say, I just know that you're going to put on something that, even if I don't recognize the artist, that I'm going to let my curiosity guide me, and I trust that you're going to not let me down. So, yeah.
I think for me, John, I think that a lot of us in the arts, and I know Andre is a leader, a thought leader in this process nationally, we're moving away from an art-centric organization into thinking of ourselves as a community organization that believes in community engagement. So if the strength of our community is there and that sustains, it will sustain us. But I really think we need to make that shift now in our culture, because elitist arts are fading pretty fast, like we saw last night in Hancher. They're not going to be around in 20 years. Could I ask Rindy if he has some stuff to say about this panel? I expect he does.
Are the panelists okay with an emergency respondent? Or not emergency, but a contingent respondent? Or did you want to respond to the question
Just
first?
really quickly, I think,
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. You want to build a brand so that even before you sort of start announcing talent, people buy tickets and people want to engage with your festival. But, you know, and I'm sure maybe this is a little bit of this this works the same way in Knoxville. But the reality is, like, producing a festival in Iowa City, you're really not going to, you know, be able to do a festival like the sort of more conventional way of sort of large headlining talent, headliners that are immediately recognizable, right? You have to sort of build that trust and that connection with an audience inherently in just sort of creating a festival in a small market, you know? It's tough to get people here. It's expensive to get people here. And we just don't have the huge venues and spaces that can support bringing in, you know, someone who's going to draw 10, 15, 20,000 people to a performance like you would in a much bigger city. So you have to sort of, you know, figure that out.
A bigger city like Knoxville.
Twice the size.
All right. If you'd be willing to respond, if you want to introduce yourself for the audience.
Hi, I'm Rindy Eckert, and I do a lot of different things in the arts, singer and composer and director, and work with Roomful of Teeth. One of my pieces is on their first album. So, know all the people you're talking about, so I've worked with a lot of them. But I'm just struck by the fact that it's actually gratifying to hear you all struggling with these questions. Of course, the arts are changing very rapidly, and all of those of us who make art are asking the same questions. We're trying to build that same sense of community. We realize the importance of that. And many of us were the beneficiaries of a kind of largesse that is now disappearing, as Wally was saying, and we're trying to figure it out as fast as you are trying to figure it out. And it's wonderful to feel from all of you this concern for artists and really the support. And that you're asking these questions, that you're trying to figure it out as we are, and it just I felt kinship, which is a really, I think the key word here is kinship. But that's, I think, my response. Thanks.
So if go ahead, yeah.
Yeah, I was just, you know, the root word of curator is cura. It's a Latin word that meant care, as in caring for someone that's ill. And it developed into the word cure for that illness. But over time, it became in the 17th century a word called curate, which was the man or woman in the local parish who looked over his flock and arranged for church business. And then somehow that moved into the art world, where, you know, I assemble a show, I hang it, I put some thought behind it, I publish a book, and that's my curation of the art experience. But I think from us, you feel a sense of caring that we must not lose, John, about our community, that has a magic and a power to it that we cannot lose, you know. As long as we're empowered by our board of directors of people who give us money, so we can do our insanities, you know, or encourage you to join us as we follow along with an artist. But I think it's all about caring for community and your belief in community.
All right, our presenters have agreed to stay for a few more minutes. It's officially 5 o'clock, so if you don't want to be rude and you've been like, oh man, I just got to get out of here, you don't have to feel rude, you can leave, but if you'd want to ask a few more questions or hear a few more answers, you are welcome also to stay, just to give the polite nod that it's officially over time, if that's something important to you. I had a follow-up question with Randy's comment, though, in terms of, to what extent has curation or programming become its own art form? Like, how much are you an artist as you assemble together a festival or an event or a program or a series?
Every good curator I know is or was an artist. You know, Andre is going home every night and writing songs and writing essays. You know, I don't know what you do, but I'm still exploring my art and the possibilities of it, directing, building buildings, doing all kinds of things to make more art possible. So I think that belief is there real strong. I can't speak for you.
Yeah, I mean, I forget what the question was, because that was a really beautiful response, and I can say that I wouldn't identify as an artist necessarily, but I have a passion for exploring art, and I do care. I'm a writer, and I play the drums really sloppily, but you know, I have that. You know, I do have that inclination as well. Yeah, but yeah.
I have a little trouble with the being a curator that it's an art form. I'm not sure that's true, because I think of a curator as selecting among artists who are working. There's a lot of taste involved. There's a lot of ability to budget and raise money involved. But whether it's an art form in itself, I would resist. I'm not sure.
So Simeon, as somebody who's familiar with electronic music and loops and taking samples of things, and also the fashion world where you have a lot of things that hadn't been considered art that you're trying to bring into the foreground as art, is sampling from a diverse group of artists and kinds of art, does that, like, how much of your curating resembles building a track or something like that? Like, how much of it is just looping things together that wouldn't necessarily?
Yeah, I think that's a really effective analogy there. Curation, like a producer sampling and taking bits and pieces of existing, music to create something new, potentially. But I kind of shy away from this question because I'm not an artist, and I try to make that very clear in a lot of the work and all the work that I do, that I'm not an artist. I'm more of a curator, facilitator for art, for artists, producing events. Is that an art form? Gosh, I think that's ultimately for the audience to decide and to really sort of make that decision. But yeah, I don't know.
But if you're going to put together a symphony, and the symphony is composed of different thought ideas and different colors and different designers and different photographers, I mean, how different is that from a choreographer who moves human bodies on a stage, or a composer who writes a symphony, or a chamber piece, or like how different really is the way that your mind works when constructing a 2-day festival from those kinds of ways that something is created?
Yeah, maybe very similarly. I think maybe the hang-up is sort of the notions we have around art and artists, right? And for some folks, to be an artist and to create art is a very specific thing. And for lots of other people, to talk about art and talk about being an artist may be somewhat alienating, somewhat distracting, off-putting. Mm-hmm. And so I don't know. Is it a helpful sort of to be considered an artist if you're a creator? I don't know. But you're right. That's what you're choreographing. You're constructing an experience from start to finish, and you have in mind a complete body of work, right? And that's one of the things I really appreciate about this festival, is that from start to finish, it is it's not events or programming in isolation, right? It's the entire 2-day experience that if you really, dive in and embrace, it is like a painting. It is sort of constructed as sort of a piece of art, So.
You're an artist. We have another question up here.
To whom it may apply. When you're looking for sponsorships or looking out to the community and businesses for help with whatever project you're working on, how do you convince them that them helping you will benefit them in the end? How do you persuade them that what you're doing is going to add value to their business or whatever?
I think it's a delicate dance. Okay, so-and-so who runs an electric supply company may have no interest or knowledge, as you were saying about your festival and what you do, but he might give you a check because it's good for the community. He's more likely to give you a check if he thinks it's good for his business. Okay, let's be honest. That having his name associated with your name, your festival's name, will pay off for him in the end. Okay? It's pretty much that blunt. I'm sorry Katie's gone because she raises a lot of money for the Englert from sponsors, buy ads in the program, support specific events and so on. You want to add to that?
Yeah, I think in like kind of piggybacking off of that, just understanding the needs of the person that you're approaching. What would really benefit them, or what are they looking for? And the first question should be, is what they looking for? Does that resonate with our event and what we mean and what our mission is? And then if the answer is yes, then yeah, finding that common ground. But it's true, Big Ears receives, we receive support by people who couldn't care less the artists who we're bringing, trying to sell them on like, oh my gosh, this artist is incredible, it'll blow your mind. They're like, I don't care. I care about the community. I care about Knoxville, and I believe this is good for our city. I'm going to write you a check. But then certain sponsors, like more brand oriented, they want to have their recognition in some capacity and association with the festival, and so it depends on the needs. Yeah.
Case in point is the Traverse City Film Festival. Michael Moore. There are people up there who despise his politics, but they like what he's doing for the town. Because he brings tourists in, he brings excitement in, the restaurants do well, the hotels do well, and they just love being a part of something big. So they support it, even though they don't like his movies.
Yeah.
Would you take money from a business whose politics that you didn't agree with? Like, what's the relationship of economics in the arts when it comes to who funds your vision?
That's a tough one.
It's a really tough one.
Depends on what type of
if you don't want to go on the
disagreement.
record, like this is being brought, like,
Oh,
I
I
feel like,
will.
yeah.
I'm not working anymore, so.
I'll let you answer that.
I remember so well, Karen will remember this too, when I had a good friend who worked for the Philip Morris Company in New York, and they were not only the progenitors of death, but they were big funders of the arts. Very important for BAM, for the Next Wave Festival that I quoted earlier, for promoting all this wonderful new work. And I got some real feedback negatively from some of my patrons. And I went and talked to one of my very important guys, a heart surgeon, and he said, looked at me and he said, take the money and run.
Simeon?
Yeah, I think it depends on what types of disagreement that you have with sponsoring entity. Is it just is this a business that is sort of diametrically opposed from your value set? Or do they just have sort of a cell of politics or track record of politics that, are problematic? Wally, when you're talking, I was reminded of an example of a guy named Tavis Smiley, who's this radio host. And, he got, because he sort of had developed this large audience of Black listeners across the country through his radio show, through events, through his books, he was able to clean up with corporate donations, right? Folks trying to reach the Black community, and several years ago, Wells Fargo was one of his sort of biggest sponsors, and they were one of sort of the biggest perpetrators of, the subprime, predatory lending practices to Black people. Yikes. Like, what does he do? What do you do, right? I mean, Tavis probably is really problematic now, but then, maybe really believes in the work. Was he willing to sort of like take the check because he couldn't do what he wanted to do without, Wells Fargo? I don't know. And I'm not trying to sort of like judge him or judge the situation, but I just found that really interesting. And just politically, like, take the check maybe, but don't I don't know, make sure that you're not, I don't know, like make sure that you're not going to be exposed at some point, maybe.
I think generally they will self-identify,
Yeah.
and they'll either want their money back, which has happened to me, or they won't give it to you. And then you've got to move on.
Yeah.
Is there an alchemy involved to art, though, as a curator who's looking for funders? Like, can you take really dirty blood money and make it into something beautiful by having it fund things that you wouldn't be able to have funded otherwise?
Only wizards can do that. You know?
What's the difference between a curator and a wizard?
Yeah, hopefully not much.
Do you have any other questions?
Can I just say one thing?
Sure.
I just a thought that I had. I think where the art enters in your very good question there, whether we're artists or not, as if we're curators, is I used to hear when I first took the Hancher job that, well, don't worry about it, Chappell. You're only as good as what's on the road. Which is a terrible thing to say, that you're dependent on agents who send you stuff. It's not true. But that there is that attitude towards the presenting and the arts business. You're only as good as what's on the road. I think where the art enters in is where you say, stop that. And where you get involved in making choices that you will control the art that you present, in the best sense of the word. That you will develop a project that is very important to your community. But we deal with that every day of our lives.
Carissa, would you like to add more to that?
Oh, I think that was spot on. You can create the opportunity and even help support and nurture the work to come into being. I mean, a number of the most delicious, most special, most like just thrill-inducing projects that we're presenting right now are not they're not pounding the pavement. They're not taking, Roomful of Teeth is not going to go do like 147 dates of this Mapplethorpe piece this year. These are really special, and the institutions that come together to support them and present them are, you get to do that. And then, and some institutions get to help commission work too, which Big Ears doesn't yet, but I would love for that to be a part of the future. Like, then you can build on these relationships with artists and say, do you have an idea that I can help bring into being, and we work together to make it? Like, that's completely opposite than you're as good as what is on the road,
Yeah. Well, the wonderful thing about Iowa City is that we've been able to do all this commissioning because they were easily convinced that being a part of an interesting new work from an interesting artist is something worth doing.
Yeah.
Here's a
it's
check.
incredible. It's
You know?
amazing.
Damn it.
I'm moving to Iowa City. All right.
Please
Sold.
do, yeah. Simeon, what would you say about being the kind of festival that builds roads rather than being what's good is on the road? Like,
Yeah.
what would you say about building new roads, which it sounds like you're trying to do with your work?
Good.
Yeah, I think that what we try to do sort of always have our heads on a swivel, to really be paying attention to what people are creating, what folks are doing, and what new projects or creative endeavors folks are trying to bring to life, and be the festival that's going to sort of provide a platform for those things. But sometimes, what folks are doing isn't, evident, right? It's not sort of, these people aren't regularly performing at venues. You just sort of have to try to immerse yourself in communities or have people that are part of those communities that can help you sort of identify who those folks are.
So a curator is really only as good as the other people that she or he listens to?
Yeah, that's a really important part of it, yeah.
Other questions before we wrap up? How many of you learned something? Awesome. Thank you guys so much.